Hello gang, and welcome to Displaying Model Behavior, where today I'm going to tell you all about Maria Calasantos, aka Ferrell. Why am I talking about her? Well, finally, Marvel Legends have revealed that they are making a new Ferrell action figure. And I know some of you might be thinking, Dave, we have a Ferrell action figure. Why do we need a new one? Yeah, so I'm looking forward to this. So Ferrell has quite a cool backstory. You want to hear about it? Here it goes. So Maria grew up in a very bad part of town in New York. She had a little brother named Mario and a little sister called Carolina, I think was her name, and they had it rough right from the start. Not long after, well, actually I say not long after she was born. She was a young kid, but her father eventually walked out on them, left the family, and then in Marvel being like a little dramatic, they revealed that he later died of an overdose. Shortly after finding out that her father had passed away, Maria started to develop her mutant powers. She didn't instantly become the werewolf cat-like creature, but her senses began to get very heightened. So she had an enhanced sense of smell, hearing, all that catty type stuff. Now, later on in Marvel Comics, they would reveal that this was a very specific type of mutation called Ferrell mutation. And she shares this kind of characteristic with other X-Men type characters like Wolverine and Sabretooth, probably Wild Child as well. Anyone who has a kind of a canine or a cat-like sort of animalistic kind of mutation is classified as a Ferrell mutant. Actually, Wolverine and Sabretooth have some completely ridiculous backstory that I think might have been retconned, where there were two packs and there was always one dark-haired one and one blonde one. It was really freaking dumb, but we're not talking about them. So just like Wolverine, Maria had these kind of feral instincts and urges that made her very violent, or at least quick to anger. She couldn't control her emotions, and I think a lot of that was probably just played off as, well, that's puberty for you. But actually it was her trying to combat these animalistic instincts. So the only thing that she had that sort of calmed her down and gave her some peace were these pet pigeons that she looked after. Now, even though it turns out that she was an animal lover, that doesn't actually mean she was necessarily all that good of a person. See, Ferrell, even though she goes on to join X-Force, she's not necessarily one of the good guys. You see, she blamed her siblings for their father leaving them. If not outright, then very subtly, and she harbored that resentment, and she'd be abusive towards them and generally just thoroughly unpleasant. And there came a time Carolina, Maria's little sister, died after falling down the stairs, and it's always left like a little bit ambiguous as to whether or not this was actually the result of Maria pushing her. It was never revealed, which is what ambiguous means. Thanks, Dave. But there's enough doubt there that you do have to wonder, is this character's backstory even darker than we often let on? Now, I mentioned those pigeons earlier? Yeah, that comes back into play because her brother Mario also suffers a fate. Not a fate worse than death. He suffers death. Do you suffer death? I'm belaboring this point. But while looking at her pigeons, he falls over the ledge of the roof and he dies as well. Again, it's questioned as to whether or not Maria, who was present at the time, had something to do with his death. Now, if you thought this character's backstory couldn't get any more tragic, well, don't worry. We got plenty more for you. Because her mother starts dating this scumbag guy who ends up getting her addicted to drugs. And of course, that completely changes her personality, makes her completely dependent, and even more so breaks down what's left of the family. As if they don't have enough going on already, Maria's sister, Lucinda, is it Lucinda? I'll double check that. I'm pretty sure it's Lucinda. She starts developing the same kind of mutant abilities, and she actually starts to get the canine or lupine or what's the cat one? Feline. There you go. It was one of the lines. She starts to get the feline features coming in with the claws and the fur, so her mutation is looking very obvious, which means it's a real bad time for her mother's boyfriend to try and do something terrible to her. He really is clearly not a good decision maker because that didn't work out well for him, which is a good thing. So Maria, who had undergone her mutations and she was becoming full-on feral now, she straight up murders her mum's boyfriend, which honestly I gotta say is fair enough really. Now, it almost just becomes comedically tragic at this point because Maria's mother isn't happy that she saved her sister from the abusive, gross drug dealer boyfriend of hers. No, she blames her for his death. I mean, to be fair, she was kind of hands-on with it. But yeah, that doesn't go well either. And then they get into a fight, and Maria, overcome with her feline mutation, the feral berserker rage, she ends up killing her mother as well. So, yeah, this family's kind of snake-bit. Having nowhere left to go and realizing that this growing pile of bodies was going to start looking suspicious, the two sisters decided to descend into the sewers of New York to join the Morlock community, where everybody knows your name. And thus, the mutant known as Ferrell was born, and that is her very dark, very bleak origin story, but we know her best as the pink and white clad member of X-Force, or at least that's how I know her, and that's how we're getting her in action figure form. Finally, because now we can put X-Force together as a team, and that's something I've been looking forward to. So with that in mind, let me just tell you a little bit about some of her early adventures with X-Force. So in the name of making a new start for themselves, they completely left their old lives behind. I mean, what exactly were you going to go back to? So they completely abandoned their old identities and they fully embraced their mutation, which had kind of gone into overdrive at this point. So instead of just having slightly feline features, this is where we got the full cat lady transformation with the hair and the tails and the feralness, and it's kind of a big change once they get down into the Morlock tunnels. But funnily enough, even surrounded by all of these other outcast mutants, they still don't really fit in with the people around them, because once again, being the feral nature that they have with their mutation, they basically just don't play well with others. What also accelerated their exit from the Morlocks was the Morlocks' current leader, Mask, who they did not get along with or agree with his kind of approach to how the Morlocks should be living and organizing themselves, and they knew they had to separate and get away from that. Also, while they were escaping, they decided to split up because, that's what you do. And this is where we get the big character split between the two sisters. So Thorn goes off and she eventually finds the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. So that takes her down one very distinct path. Whereas Ferrell, she goes the complete opposite direction and she winds up at the Xavier Institute. So that kind of is the first step towards her redemption arc. And this is pretty good timing for Ferrell because the New Mutants are based out of Westchester, and this is at the stage where Cable has just arrived on the scene and he's taking them full on like mutant military task force. So it's no longer the cute and cuddly Xavier Kitty Pryde New Mutants, but it's the badass Rob Liefeld 90s Cable-led team. So Ferrell is going to fit right in. So Ferrell agreed to join the New Mutants, and they agreed to take her on under the caveat that they were going to help her take down Mask and sort of liberate the Morlocks from his control. But as we said before, Ferrell doesn't really play well with others, so she immediately starts rubbing her teammates the wrong way, and she and Cannonball in particular can never seem to get on the same page. Paige, like Paige Guthrie, that's his sister, yeah? I did a thing. I didn't mean to. And as I said, this is of course the time where the New Mutants become X-Force under Cable's tutelage. And that's kind of good and bad for Ferrell because, yeah, it's great that Nathan Summers is badass, take no prisoners, military dude, and she's fine with that. She's like, okay, so we're gonna take no prisoners, jack people up, and get results? Awesome. But of course, he's a soldier, so it's all about following orders and the chain of command. And did I mention that she didn't get along well with Cannonball? Yeah, that's kind of problematic then when Cable makes Cannonball the team leader, or at least the co-leader along with Siren. So now she has at least two people that she has to answer to, and Ferrell, yeah, she's not cool with that. So Ferrell really did take on the role of the Wolverine of the team, being the gruff, tough, not really getting along with authority type character, even to the point where, like Wolverine on occasion, she would dangerously injure her teammates during training, in particular Cannonball and Siren, who of course she had the problem with to begin with, especially Siren, who she found it very frustrating that she couldn't charm her way around, because that's what she tended to do with the other men on the team. She could use her feline feminine wiles, and Siren's like, I'm sorry, milady, but I didn't swing that way. I'm like half Irish, and that was the worst Irish accent I've ever heard. So it was only a matter of time until X-Force eventually collided with the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, and that meant that Ferrell met up with her sister, and they clashed against one another. I've been trying to resist saying her sister's code name because my brain just ejected it, so I'm just going to say her sister. You know who I'm talking about. But that, of course, caused Ferrell to have to reckon with and make peace. Well, not make peace. That's she hasn't got there yet. But it meant that she had to confront her dark and violent past. Eventually, despite all the difficulties with getting along with the team, Ferrell did actually remain with X-Force for quite a long time. She was a standard-bearer member, because even though she butted heads with the people who were giving her instructions, X-Force was such a take-no-prisoners, badass kind of team, there were a lot of people on there who she did actually get along very well with, particularly characters like Shatterstar and Warpath, who shared a similar violent approach to ultimately doing the right thing, but doing it in a violent kind of way. And there was even some flirtatious moments between her and Shatterstar, which ultimately didn't amount to anything, but it made for an interesting dynamic for the team. I might do a completely separate video on how to build the X-Force team with Marvel Legends, but that's for another time. In fact, I think I might have done that already. Check out the archives. Unfortunately, to all good things an ending, and also to all things that weren't particularly great, but everyone just got on with it anyway, those also end as well, and Ferrell's time with X-Force came to a pretty dramatic conclusion when she betrays the team. I love a good bit of mutant drama, and this is a storyline involving the Mutant Liberation Front, and is it Henry Peter Gyrick or Peter Henry Gyrick? I can never get that right, but either way, the Mutant Liberation Front kidnap him, which kicks off a plot that ultimately unravels X-Force. So Rainfire, who was the leader of the Mutant Liberation Front, it is MLF. Yeah, that's who I'm talking about. Well done, Dave. He actually convinces Ferrell to turn on X-Force and join the MLF, basically just by playing on her hatreds towards Gyrick. Yeah, I'm just going to call him Gyrick from now on. Rainfire's other big kind of sales technique towards Ferrell was simply that he, unlike Cable and all the other X-Force members, he would never hold her back. Or more to the point, I would think, make her feel bad for who she is. She would probably say, yeah, I just want to cut loose and, not let these weak people stop me. But secretly, I don't mind implying, I think, that she felt bad about some of the stuff she had done, and she wanted someone who was going to say, no, don't feel bad. You're doing the right thing. Yes, slash those people to ribbons. That was a good thing. That's me imprinting my logic on there. This, of course, led to a confrontation between the MLF and X-Force, and Cable confronted Ferrell. And throughout the fight, they were having it out with Cable trying to convince her that she was on the wrong path and bring her back to the team, but she was having none of it, to the point where Cable was like, okay, I might just have to shoot you, just to put you down and then maybe try and talk some sense into you. Eventually, Ferrell and the MLF got away from X-Force in that battle, and I think Ferrell kind of felt like, wow, they were straight up just gonna kill me, which wasn't the case, but you know what things are like in the heat of battle, and the rest of X-Force were kind of disappointed, but also not surprised at what Ferrell did. So basically, it was a very acrimonious finish for her on the team. Now we're getting to a little bit of an endgame, at least as far as the classic run with Ferrell and X-Force is concerned. So Ferrell's sister gets apprehended by the police, which brings her out of hiding, and then Cannonball and X-Force are there waiting for her, and they're going to try and engage her in a fight and get her so riled up that in front of police and witnesses, she confesses to all the awful stuff that she's done throughout her life, and they can finally have her apprehended and taken care of, and hopefully rehabilitated. So throughout this fight, when Cannonball's mixing it up with Ferrell, he quickly realizes, oh no, I'm trying to do a tactical combat type thing, and she's straight up trying to murder me. So it really has, it's come to a head now at this point. Luckily, though, his plan does work, and she confesses to the murder of her mother's boyfriend, and even the potential involvement in her sibling's death as well, which is enough evidence for her to be apprehended, at which point Cannonball is able to finally defeat her, and she's, I don't want to say apprehended again, arrested. There you go. I'm not going to redo that. She's arrested by the NYPD, and that brings her story to a close for this point. I won't say for now, because that was 30 years ago. And after that, of course, there is a whole bunch more story for Ferrell, but that's where I'm going to leave this, because otherwise we're going to be moving on to a different look for Ferrell, which would ultimately require a different costume and a different Marvel legend. But that is what pink and white Ferrell represents to me and most other 40-something-year-old goobers my age who grew up with 90s X-Force. And that is why we are so happy to finally see Marvel Legends doing this figure so we can at last complete our X-Force team. So folks, that does it for my review of at least the early history of Ferrell. Does she go on to be redeemed? Does she catch the legacy virus and get killed off and then brought back? And yeah, basically all those things. She has quite the salty past and past history future that we could go on with. That's another video for another time. So gang, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video,
bub.
I'd appreciate the old thumbs up. And until next time, keep displaying model behavior.
Coffee. Big time.